Advocacy can start with a single conversation, then change the world.
Dr. Kelly, what is mental health first aid? What's the elevator pitch?
Mental health first aid is all about how you can support someone who's developing a mental health problem or who's in a mental health crisis or who's experiencing a worsening of a mental health problem until professional help has been received. So it's about how everyday people can have a conversation that could get somebody down the road towards getting help.
It all began with a dog walk.
In 1997, Betty and I had a conversation about why conventional first aid courses, like the ones run by Red Cross, don't cover mental health problems, like how do you help someone who's suicidal or out of contact with reality or having a panic attack.
Mental health first aid has grown beyond all expectations. Now it's a global movement, 35 countries and counting.
And we're up to 8 million trained. And again, every month, it seems to be a bigger number.
I don't know that there's anybody that I talk to about mental health first aid that doesn't feel a part of that community, a part of that 8 million.
Discover how simple conversations can be a catalyst to save lives on this episode of Wellbeing Wednesdays.
Well, welcome to Wellbeing Wednesdays. I'm so excited to be with you. I'm Tremaine Elamine, and I'm the Vice President for Mental Health First Aid USA at the National Council for Mental Wellbeing. Today, we are joined by one of the co-founders of Mental Health First Aid International, Professor Tony Jorm. And we are also joined by Dr. Claire Kelly, who has had so many titles and hats at Mental Health First Aid International that I don't even know your title right now. Dr. Kelly, can you tell us about what?
Coincidentally, I can't remember it either. Chief Hat Wearer. No, my current title is Senior Advisor, Research, Translation and Impact, which subject matter expert at Mental Health First Aid. I'm involved in writing manuals and developing programs and we're still wearing as many hats as I can manage on a day-to-day basis.
And all of that fits on one business card.
I don't have a card anymore for that exact reason.
So
They should also say Claire was the co-founder of Teen Mental Health First Aid along with Laura Hart.
Oh,
So she's a founder as well, the next generation founder.
I love it. I love it. So all the hats, the founder hat, the chief cook and candlestick maker hat, all of the things. So I can't imagine that you all felt this would be as big of a program it is globally right now. But for those of us who are watching and may not be aware, can you tell me, Dr. Kelly, what is mental health first aid? What's the elevator pitch?
Yes, absolutely. I think a lot of people have done a first aid course where they learn how they could help someone if they found someone who'd perhaps fallen over in the street and broken a leg, or in Australia, maybe been bitten by a snake. Mental health first aid is all about how you can support someone who's developing a mental health problem or who's in a mental health crisis or who's experiencing a worsening of a mental health problem until professional help has been received or the crisis has resolved. So it's about how everyday people can have a conversation that could get somebody down the road towards getting help.
That's wonderful. And I love it because it is so accessible, right?
Yes.
It is for anyone. I always like to say it's for anybody that has a heartbeat, right?
Yeah.
Right? If you are working and connecting with human beings,
Yes.
mental health first aid is for you.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So the origin story, that's what I think.
The origin
folks wanna know.
story,
What's
yes.
the origin story?
The origin story is that in 1997, my wife, Betty Kitchener, and I were walking our dog. So we lived then in Canberra, which is the capital of Australia. So sometimes for Americans, we call it Canberra, DC, so they know it's the capital. And we had this dog called King. He was a little King Charles Cavalier. He'd been a stray dog, and we adopted him, and we used to take him for morning walks and evening walks. So on the evening walk in 1997, Betty and I had a conversation about why conventional first aid courses, like the ones run by Red Cross, don't cover mental health problems, like how do you help someone who's suicidal or out of contact with reality or having a panic attack. And we thought this is rather odd because the chances that you would encounter someone who had a mental health crisis or a mental health problem is probably much greater than you'd use your CPR or other skills you get from physical first aid. So that might seem a very strange conversation to have on a dog walk, but there was a background context to it. So for Betty, she had a very personal interest in mental health because when she was an adolescent, She had some very difficult family circumstances, and she had a serious episode of depression in mid-adolescence. She had a suicide attempt, and that was not really handled at all well by people around her. You'd say nowadays you would hope that the people around a young person, an adolescent, would have had youth mental health first aid training and they would have known how to handle it better, but back then they didn't. And that lack of good care from people around her at the time may have set her off on a trajectory, which she did have, where she had subsequent episodes of depression throughout life, including hospitalisation. So she had that personal interest. She'd also trained as a teacher, worked as a teacher, as a nurse and as a counsellor. So she had this diversity of skills. And also she used to teach Red Cross first aid courses on the side, so she knew all about teaching first aid. So that's her in this conversation. That's the background. And then there's me in the conversation. Well, I was a researcher at the Australian National University in Canberra, DC, and with colleagues, I'd carry out this large survey on mental health literacy, what the public understand about mental health problems. We did this large national survey in Australia, and then we surveyed a whole lot of mental health professionals and asked them the same questions. And we found this huge gulf between the two in their thinking. So I was very primed to think, how on earth can we overcome this gulf? Because I believe that if we're to handle the magnitude of mental health problems in the community, like in the US, you've got 1 in 5 adults a year at the diagnosable level, it's a huge number of people, that it can't be handled by mental health professionals alone. It's got to be a whole of community approach. Everybody needs to know what they can do to prevent in themselves, prevent mental health problems in family members, in children, what they can do if they're developing a problem to seek appropriate help, what self-help strategies are useful. So I was very oriented to all of this, and I was looking for ways that we could intervene at a population level. So then the idea that we could do mental health problems and mental health crises in a first aid course, I thought, wow, that's great. So we had this conversation, and we both thought, this is a great idea.
It was.
Yes, it was, but we didn't realize it would get so big. So we decided that we would do this in our spare time, and our vision was 1 or 2 courses a year on weekends in Canberra as a community service activity. We did not connect it to our employment, either of us, at the time. So we had many subsequent dog walks, and we would talk about what would go in the course. We got quite excited about it, but 3 years went by, and we never did it.
Wait,
3 years.
Wait. 3 years.
That's right, 1997 up to 2000. And then what really made a difference is that Betty bit the bullet, and she reduced her paid working hours. She worked at the hospital in Canberra, and she worked part-time as a volunteer. And then it really got going. That made the big difference. Half a year later, she got a very small grant, which paid her a part-time salary, and then she quit her hospital job and worked full-time on the part-time salary. And then it just went in leaps and bounds. And because I was a researcher, and Betty's very research, evidence-oriented, we began evaluating all the courses right from the very beginning and published results, and they looked good, and that got some international attention. And then it got bigger and bigger. It went from Canberra to a big rural area around Canberra, and then it went to other parts of Australia. And then because we published the research, some people in Scotland read the research, and they said, well, this is what we need in Scotland. So then Betty went over to Scotland and trained people there, and it just went from country to country until it got, I think it's 35 countries currently. By the time the viewers see this, it's probably 36 or 37. It keeps going up. And we're up to, 8 million trained? And again, every month, it seems to be a bigger number, but that's the current number. So if somebody from the present were to come back, and to those 2 people in 1997 at the dog walk appear before them, an apparition, and say, one day there's going to be 35 countries, 8 million people. Oh, come on. No way. No way.
From a dog.
Or from the dog walk, yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And the thing is, I don't know that there's anybody that I talk to about mental health first aid that doesn't feel a part of that community, a part of that 8 million. And just from that one idea being planted, that seed being watered, if you will,
Yeah.
We're now at 4.3 million, over 4 million.
In the US,
That's
a lot of, yeah. And we're about 1.5 million in Australia.
We are.
Yeah.
And so from two people,
Yeah.
millions.
Well, I always say to people, and I think this myself, that was a conversation we didn't think a great deal of at the time. We have many conversations about things, and some of them nothing comes from. Some things are small things, sometimes occasionally a big thing like this. But any of us can have a conversation today or tomorrow or the next day, and who knows what's going to come with it. Our life can just change. The trajectory of life can just change dramatically from that conversation. And our lives change dramatically, the fact that I'm here because of that conversation, but also through Mental Health First Aid, we have conversations. That's what it's all about. It's about having conversations for people who we're concerned about and we care about, and we hope that we can influence the trajectory of their lives, sometimes in a very small way, sometimes maybe occasionally in a very major way. So it all fits.
Yeah.
Changing trajectories through conversations that can take life in a different direction.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Conversations that matter.
Yes, and every conversation might matter. You don't know until you start. But I think a lot of us were raised to mind our own business. A lot of us were, don't pry into people's personal issues, those sorts of things. That it's actually to the point where we've lost a lot of that sense of community that is so essential to nurturing each other. To think it's not all that long ago that we really were a lot more sort of collectivist. So that's amazing. But I think that often mental health first aid courses will teach people that actually they've got a lot of the knowledge already. They're just afraid to use it. They're afraid to make things worse. So we're sort of consolidating and organising that knowledge in a way that makes them feel confident that I can have this conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. And speaking of that conversation, there's a mnemonic that helps us remember what to do when, keeps it in order, much like the first aid and CPR courses with the 3 letters of that course. But there's 5 letters. And so I won't quiz you, but I know you know them by heart, Dr.
I
L.
do.
So if you could tell those that are viewing, what are those letters and the ALGEE action plan?
Yes. So the first letter, A, is approach the person, assess and assist with any crisis. So that's about preparing to start the conversation and also looking out for any signs that the person might be in crisis, such as, if you start to hear them talk in a way that makes you think maybe they're having thoughts of suicide. L is for listen and communicate non-judgmentally. And I think that's where so much of the teaching happens, because I think a lot of people think that they're better listeners than they actually are.
Get as charged in my former life. Yeah.
But also because, we can't be completely non-judgmental, and we're trying to help people to understand that it's about making the person feel not judged.
Mm-hmm.
That we're setting that aside and saying it doesn't matter what I think. What matters is that you are a person who's in need of help, and I can have that conversation compassionately. G is for give support and information, and that can be about practical support and emotional support, and really importantly, consistent support. The person needs to know that they'll get a consistent response from you when they talk to you, as well as information, which is a lot easier these days because we've got such a lot of high quality information on the internet. 20 years ago, it was the Wild West. These days, you find a lot of really great information, but always best to sort of look at what is the source. Is it a government department or a university? Is it a well-known public health organisation? Or is it one person trying to sell magic crystal pills? And then the 2 E's, the first is encourage the person to seek appropriate professional support. So that would be looking at probably initially a doctor, but really about how do we get people into a pipeline that is likely to get them an evidence-based treatment. So that's really important. And encourage other supports, which is about people who can help and self-help strategies that have an evidence base that we know can be helpful for people.
Yeah.
And I should also chip in here that the word ALGEE, the acronym, doesn't really mean anything in English. So my wife, Betty Kitchener, was faced with this, how can you get people to remember this word ALGEE? And when she took mental health first aid to Hong Kong, which is the second place outside Australia it went to, the instructors she trained there said, you need a mascot, because they like having little furry bears and pandas and things like that. And she came back to Australia and she told me she thought a koala would be a good mascot. And I told her, I think that's a waste of time, having a mascot. There are better things to spend our time on. And I've told her many times since over the years, I was totally wrong. She was totally right. ALGEE was a very good idea. So we have a koala mascot in Australia, and that's been adopted in the US as well. And I think it helps people remember ALGEE as a word. It now has meaning as well as an acronym. It has a meaning as a word. And a lot of people don't know that there is also a real algae. There is a real koala called ALGEE because Betty sponsored the care for a baby koala whose mother had died. So it was a koala who was got to the size where it was no longer in the mother's pouch. It was on the mother's back, and the mother died, and a sanctuary took it over, and Betty paid for it to be raised and released. And she asked, could it be called ALGEE? And it was, and we used to get regularly sent pictures of ALGEE. It was supposed to be a very lively bear. He loved his gum leaves.
He liked pushing his friends out of trees.
That's right, yeah. He was a bossy bear, yeah, bossy koala, yeah.
A bossy marsupial.
Bossy marsupial, that's right, yeah.
Well, that's amazing, because I think we all need meaning, right? We need to tie what we're experiencing to something tangible. Yeah. I think those conversations are tangible. ALGEE is now tangible. I can't tell you how many of our ALGEE koalas are like all the rage at all of our events. And so I think that helps us connect, but it also helps us remember. And so that's
it's a memory device. And Betty's a good teacher. She understood that. I didn't.
We have this on tape, so we will share her.
That's right.
So, that's, I think, you already expressed that you never kind of thought this would be a global movement when you started.
All right.
Right? Oh, you did.
I did. Look, I went to my first mental health first aid course towards the beginning of 2001, and Betty had sort of told me what it was about. I hadn't quite been able to picture it, but I sat down in that course, and there were maybe 15 of us, all from Canberra, DC, obviously. And she started talking, and she was talking about how you can have these conversations. It might be emotionally a little bit tricky, but the skills are easy. And I was sitting there and I felt like the whole world had just opened up. I thought I could do this forever. This is something that is going to change lives. So although Betty and Tony kept saying, oh, no other country's interested in taking it on, I was like, obviously. So it's been amazing. It's really been amazing to watch. But I've always had faith that it would do this, because people connect with it. People who have been putting off a conversation with someone they care about, they're thinking, I can do that now. I can have that conversation. I know what to say. I know that I need to worry less about the exact right words and more about just being genuinely caring and asking the person, what do they need from me? And that's where it all started. Just those conversations.
Yeah.
But back in 2001, when you were sitting there with Betty and being trained as one of the first instructors, did you ever imagine you'd be here in Philadelphia doing this podcast, and this would be your work, and you'd be going internationally?
Yeah, this was my...
You had found team at our first aid.
Do you know, though, team? Yes, I always wanted to do that, because my PhD research showed that kids recognised each other's difficulties, but were even more afraid than a lot of adults to have the conversation. They didn't want to get an adult involved. So I always felt that was going to be key, that being able to do that work with Laura Hart and with the unconditional support of Betty and Tony, it's wonderful to see the difference that we've made in teens' lives as well now. It's cool. It's so cool.
It's so cool. It's so cool. And we've heard here by launching Teen in the U.S., just how much it's making a difference in high schools across the country, but also in families, right? So parents are essential to that conversation, making sure that people who are in the schools supporting young people are connected and
Yes.
can share that good information and resources. I realized that we've talked about so many elements of mental health first aid, the flavors of mental health first aid, if you will, but we didn't really explain that mental health first aid isn't just one course. It's multiple types of courses and really have content that can resonate with multiple audiences. We have adult mental health first aid for those 18 and older. We've got youth mental health first aid for adults that work with youth here in the U.S. And that's for anyone who's working with any young person, K to 12. But there's also this opportunity for that teen program that you talked about, which is a peer-to-peer program. And I love the fact that this is about showing young people, and I sound like an old people when I say young people.
Oh, we're all very young.
Showing them that, you can maintain your friendships and get the support that's necessary for somebody you care about, because teens are more likely to talk to each other than they are to ever go to someone who has, unicorn strands of gray in their hair. And so it's important to kind of have those dialogues happen with good information. You mentioned being online. There are some places online for young people that are stuck in that 20 years ago that you mentioned, Clay.
Yeah.
Right. And so really important there. So let's talk about this growth, this growth that could not be imagined. I think it would be great to just talk a little bit about, what have you seen around the shift in the conversation around mental health in the time since 1997 or even 2000, since the program was officially in the world? What are those shifts in conversations, and how do you think our fearless, amazing, splendiferous, if that's a word, group of instructors that are taking this into communities across the country, those folks that are doing that work, how do they fit into that context?
I mean, the importance of instructors really can't be overstated. Having the right instructor in the right room is so incredibly important. Can you imagine me standing in front of a group of police officers, or actually me standing in front of a group of lawyers? That'd go down well as well. People need to really understand the communities that they are visiting. Understand that although we can say something about the general mental health literacy of the community, that isn't always going to be reflected in the group that's in the room. And that's why I think that the disseminated model of mental health first aid is so essential, because we need to have not just a level of skill as an instructor and a level of knowledge to teach, but a connection with the community that makes it all come to life.
Yeah. Can you say more about that? What is the model? How does mental health first aid work?
Yeah, well, the main thing is it's about an instructor-trainer model. So Mental Health First Aid International trains new countries to pick up the program. Those countries train instructors. Train trainers actually even, and the trainers train instructors. And so what that means is that every person who gets trained has that sort of ripple out effect. And Tremaine, how many trainers are there in the United States now?
So we have a group of what I like to call a group of people with special skills that are about 70 master or national trainers.
Wonderful.
And then we have more than 38,000 over the years that we have trained as instructors.
See,
15,000 of those are so active in their communities, making mental health first aid go, so that we can be over those 4 million people trained.
And that means that, and nobody is in only one community. Everyone is in friendship, family, chosen family sort of groups, communities of purpose in the workplace, faith communities, volunteer communities, and they are all overlapping in different ways. And instructors are taking in the culture of those communities in order to better serve their own communities. And that just constantly happens. And I think having 15,000 active instructors in the USA, that's amazing to hear. That's really wonderful. And that's what's going to get you to the 1 in 15.
There it is. Thank you for that plant. 1 in 15. We want 1 in 15 people that means that anybody in their close circle in the U.S. would have someone who's trained and have the ability to have that person know what to do in connecting them to care. I think there's some research that's been done that demonstrates that we all have about 15 folks that are the closest to us, our an inner circle, if you will. And I think that that's our lofty but very achievable goal. Right now, we're at 1 in 60. I can't wait till we get to 1 in 15.
And
1 in 15, so I think it's 7.5%. In Australia, it would be about 5%, I think. Claire, now roughly it'd be something approximating that. So it's quite achievable. It's quite achievable, and hopefully for the world.
Yeah,
that would be the big thing for the world, because we're doing well. Places like the USA and Australia, high income countries, and there's so many of them that are adopting mental health first aid now and rolling it out very quickly. We were talking with people from France here yesterday, and they're doing a tremendous job rolling it out very rapidly. But then there's, the middle income and the low income countries that have great needs that I think we as a mental health first aid international community need to do more to assist them to have this community empowerment to help people with mental health problems and crises.
Absolutely. I think some of those look, some communities, some locations, some countries, there's not ever going to be enough services. In fact, I don't think that in even the most developed country there's ever going to be enough services. Otherwise, nobody's going to be working in any other industry. But every first aider who is kinder to people around them, who steps in when someone says, oh, I'm sick of this person who's not pulling their weight. Actually, maybe that person's struggling. Let's try and be a bit more compassionate. They're making a difference whether there are services available or not. And that's why mental health first aid it's not just about the conversations with people in need. It's about being an advocate for people with mental health problems in their various communities. And you can be doing that every single day.
And those individual conversations en masse become a cultural shift. So the whole culture changes about how we respond and treat people with mental health problems, the priority we give it for, government services and so on. So it becomes something that can change a nation, I think, once you get to a certain scale.
Yeah. In a family. Right?
Oh, yes, definitely.
The family, then the community, then the region, definitely the nation, but also the world. And this, I do believe this has been world-changing. I think I've been involved with mental health first aid for almost 14 years now, in some capacity, 15 almost. And the reason why is the people, number one, but also the impact we get to make. Can you talk about that community impact, right? A little bit more about that. What do you see as like the thing that you were most surprised about mental health first aid being used for or impacting over the years?
Well, I'll start off while Claire's thinking about that, because that's a big question. We've just been here at the Mental Health First Aid Summit here in Philadelphia, and I've been wandering around talking to all the instructors. I've talked to a lot of instructors. And the powerful thing they tell you is all these stories. They are so enthused, and they all tell you, I'm making such a difference in my community. You hear it again and again. They tell you individual stories about people that have been helped. And that is something that's really striking, and you take away with you. Like, I'm a researcher, so I work with statistics and randomized controlled trials, and I know from all of that, we've done lots of randomized controlled trials, and we know that people, they're better informed about what to do. They're more confident in what to do. They actually help people more. They become less stigmatized in their attitudes. We know all those good things. But when you hear those individual stories, that is the powerful thing that you take away. Now Claire's had a chance to think.
Yeah. And look, I think I agree with Tony. We can point to the randomized controlled trials. We can point to the meta-analyses that show those outstanding results that are so important to the continued spread because it works. But there's a huge difference between that and, a few weeks ago I was in India for the first ever National Mental Health Summit. They are at a turning point in India. It's really amazing to see. And our partners, Empower, over there, that run the youth program, I should say. We've got more than one partner there. They're talking about how they've sort of just started their instructor training process. And one of the things that got me about listening to the instructor stories is that the thing that unites every single instructor is that they've all got these stories from their communities that they're somehow surprised by, and they're all the same story. They're just in 1,000 different languages and different little, one of the instructors was talking about a young man getting very distressed in a hospital and a security guard tried to sort of tackle him to the ground. And she said, listen, there's some signs here that he might be out of touch with reality. Can you let me talk to him instead? And afterwards, the security guard came and said, how did you do that? What do I do? How do I get that training? How can we get that into the hospital? And that's just one story in 8.5 million. No, it's got to be, everyone would have 2 or 3 stories, I'm sure, at least.
Yeah.
But to me, it's those micro stories that are really, we can point to the evidence, but the stories are something that's really, really special.
Yeah. And I think when you meet other people who are involved with mental health first aid and people share the stories and you realize, oh, I've done these things, try and support people. And then you hear somebody else and then you go around like I was yesterday and you hear all these and you think, wow, this really adds up. All these things are very small in themselves, but they add up to something massive on a national and international scale.
Mm-hmm. Yes, ripples of impact, right?
Mm.
Those ripples of impact. While we don't want to only focus on research is important.
Yes.
I have seen firsthand how, we have to meet people where they are and what matters to them. And in a lot of circles, if the research and the evidence isn't demonstrating that mental health first aid is effective, it's not happening, right? And so, Tony, if you could just speak a little bit to, as this evolution to 30 different countries, there's got to be threads that stay consistent as it relates to mental health first aid in each one of those countries. And there's a significant evidence base that is behind it. So can you talk about how you are thinking about research in the now and how you've approached it, but also as we move into the future of the growth of mental health first aid?
Well, when Betty and I started mental health first aid training, and there was just one course for adults assisting other adults, we wanted to make it as evidence-based as possible in its content. So we looked at what research there was to inform the content of the course, and we found there was virtually nothing. There's a whole lot about what clinicians could do, like clinical practice guidelines, that what members of the public, all of us can do. There was nothing at all. So we did the best we could and came up with a course. And then we realized we had to do far better than that. And we said, well, how do like Red Cross first aid, physical first aid, how do they know how to do CPR or what to do for a snake bite or how do they know what the first aid? And we found is they have these international guidelines that then all the societies in different countries like Red Cross who run first aid courses, they all follow these guidelines and teach according to them. And then we thought, okay, we need similar international guidelines for how you do mental health first aid. We thought, well, how do you figure out, who knows, how do you help someone that's suicidal or someone who's out of contact with reality? So what we decided to do was to use an expert consensus method. So what we did was we trawled through everything anyone had ever claimed, for example, how you would help someone that was suicidal. We searched internet sites and, carers' manuals and textbooks, and we came up with hundreds and hundreds of actions that people said you should do. Some of them we thought were really bad actions, like tell them they'll go to hell and that will stop them. Some of them we thought were good actions, but we didn't judge them. And what we did was we made up a long questionnaire with all those actions, and we gave them to 2 types of people who had professional experience in helping people who had been suicidal, and people who'd been there, they've had personal experience and become advocates in the area. And what we sought was high level of consensus from both those groups about these were good things to teach. So actually we had a very young woman who was a postdoctoral fellow who worked on that. Her name was Claire Kelly many years ago. And
she happens to be right.
That's right, yeah. And
still very, very young.
After many, many years of doing that work, we then had a really good basis of everything that's taught in mental health first aid. So anything that's taught in the course, you can say to me, well, why do you teach that? And we can give you a precise figure. We can tell you the percentage of people who are professional experts and lived experience experts. It has to be at least 80% of both groups for anything to be in the course. And then we realized, of course, you've got to tailor things a lot. It's not enough to do something for the, maybe high-income countries have a lot in common, but if you get into other countries, like middle-income countries, it could be quite different. There are cultural differences as well. So we realized we also need cultural expertise. So with our Indigenous people in Australia, like, they have cultural differences. So then we got their consensus about what should be done. And as it goes into more and more countries globally, we're going to have to find out what the consensus is there. But to get to your question about what is in common, I mean, we have done some of these consensus guidelines across a number of cultures, for example, with how you help someone that's suicidal. And there are common elements. There's something about being human, about being kind to people and listening to them and not judging them, a human universals. But also there are cultural specific aspects as well that we have to take account of. So we all have something in common across all of humanity. We all also have these unique aspects, and mental health first aid training needs to adapt to both of those.
I love that. So I want to talk to you for 6 more hours. The folks in this room will not allow it.
I've got a flight.
And you've got a flight, right? So knowing that, what is one thing in the next 25 years, because we're celebrating 25 years of mental health first aid globally, what is one thing that you want to see happen in the next 25 years for each of you?
Well, to me, the goal of getting up the numbers, the large numbers of people trained, that's an intermediate goal. The ultimate goal is that people who have mental health problems or in mental health crises, that they feel supported. So I think we've got to move the target to try and evaluate, and we're doing this in Australia now, the whole population, surveys of the whole population, people who have had mental health problems and crises in the past 12 months, and how they were supported. And we're going to do that as a baseline and see how it improves. So the one area I'd like to see improvement on most of all is how people respond to someone they're concerned about has got a suicide risk, because there is a huge taboo about talking about suicide. It is a really hard thing to do, to ask people about if they're feeling suicidal, to talk about it. It can be very uncomfortable. But that is a taboo we have to overcome, because to reduce suicide, professionals can have some impact, but it's a limited one because they're not there on the occasion that suicidal thoughts can arise very quickly over a short period of time. And it's the people who are there on the spot who need to know what to do. And we do have evidence. I'll go back to the research. We do have evidence that people who are trained in mental health first aid, they are as willing to talk about suicide as professionals, and the quality of what they do is the same level of people who have professional training, of mental health professionals. So we can all, the whole population, we can get up to that level. So that would be the one thing I'd like to see, that people who are suicidal feel supported, and that people are acting in accordance with the guidelines, and the guidelines are how they say they want to be supported. So over to you, Claire.
Love that. That's such a good answer. It's probably not all that far off, but I would say that I hope that everyone who needs a mental health first aider has a mental health first aider on hand, whether they know it or not. I think we want more people to feel supported in the early stages, so that ideally in the long term we don't need as many clinical services, and those services can be reserved for people who really desperately need them. If everyone, I think it's impossible to measure, but we're putting more kindness into the world, and there's no drawback in that. Just being a better listener, being more supportive, being taking someone aside and saying, hey, can you not give this person a hard time? They're really sort of struggling right now. That there is someone in your life, whether you know it or not, who is doing that. Yeah. And then perhaps eventually being run out of a job because the whole mental health problems have disappeared.
Yeah. So being a better human, that's on the list.
Do you know what? That's a really good
yes. A better humans. Better humans.
And creating better communities.
A better world. Yeah. So grateful for your leadership, for you bringing this gift of mental health first aid to the world. So grateful for your life. Grateful you were born. and looking forward to another 25 years of mental health first aid. Thanks for joining me in conversation today.
Pleasure. Thanks, Tremaine.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Wow. That was just an amazing conversation. So many nuggets of wisdom and so much impact with mental health first aid over the last 25 years. If you'd like to learn more or become an instructor, you can visit us at MHFA.org.